I want to welcome everybody to the first episode of the Daily Cheat Sheet, where we buy the news, sell the rumor. And I understand completely that that is a complicated statement these days because nobody trusts the news. And that's why we are in this position in the first place, because we are living in a world of rumors, innuendo, and a lot of fake news. And we are here to sort of filter that out for you. And we are joined by my partners in that endeavor, Golan Ramraz, one of my favorite people
Hello,
in the world.
hello.
And a little bio on him. He is a movie producer. He's also a writer, been in the industry for before the industry existed. And he's famously from Marvel. So you got to love that. And of course, Marcus Mend Stern, one of the premier SEO internet people. I don't even know what he does. I just know he makes everything work well on the internet and runs an amazing company called grubbyyoung.com. So, welcome, guys. It's good to see you. And just want to start out with this. Last week, we were all of us on Friday, we were hit with the story by from the Jerusalem Post. Now, obviously, everybody, we are all Jewish, but the Jerusalem Post, Israel's media is a lot like America's media. It's very hard to trust, no matter what side of it, it's right or left. The Jerusalem Post posted a story that while Trump was on his mission, he was going to say that he was going to grant statehood, I guess, to the Palestinians. Now, all of us were taken aback by this article. It was a horrifically written article. It had not it had incorrect news in it when it said that Trump had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, and it said it was Trudeau, and Trudeau was long gone, and it was Carney. So we all should have had, but then all of a sudden, one person tweeted that we sort of follow. His name is Hillel Fold. He's not a bad guy; he's a good guy, but he tweeted on the rumor, and the second he tweeted on the rumor, the story just went wonky to all of us and to everyone we know. And I know Golan was immediately affected by this because this is a cause of ours that we care about. And I know you took it to heart. And what's amazing is before we all have a source. I don't want to say the source, but it's an extremely high up source that we could have asked. We decided not to ask and run on the rumor. Golan,
It wasn't even a decision not to ask. It was more of an instantaneous reaction. And part of it is, in Hillel's defense, part of it is that so much was going on. Some of it true, some of it half true, some of it, obviously, as we discovered later, fiction, that we were in panic mode. And once that went out, and it went out from a trusted source, Hillel is someone who I like very much. A lot of the stuff that he posts is stuff that I agree with. A lot of the time, he'll even break news that turns out to be accurate. So when he posted that, and to be fair, he posted it with a, can you believe this is happening? I'm not sure yet, but it is concerning. He kind of gave it that half measure. Right away, all of us kind of went into hair on fire. And once we started to do that, because we are trusted sources for other people, it just continued to spread, like an NCAA bracket. It just kept going down and down and down, and down until everybody was talking about it online. And as you pointed out, there were a lot of inaccuracies in the article. And interestingly, since then, if you go to the same link that used to say Trump is going to recognize a Palestinian state according to XYZ source that turned out to be nothing, and then said he's meeting with Justin Trudeau. Now, the same link, the very same link, now says, and I quote, Gulf diplomatic sources debate if Trump will announce U.S. recognition of a Palestinian state. So they figured out that they've been duped and they've already changed the link. And by the way, in the article, it now says Mark Carney. So everybody, including Jerusalem Post and professional publications, everyone into hair on fire mode.
extremely well said. And before I get to men, they just want to clarify. I host The World According to Ben Stein. I write for a lot of different publications. And so when Golan says that we're sources for a lot of people, we're in a community that people trust. Mend, Golan, myself, they trust and respect our opinion. I don't know what we've done to do that. we look good, we have glasses, but they have. So it sort of is Mend extremely interesting how that sort of happened. But you were one of the few men, I will grant Mend this, who did not freak out. Mend actually took it with a grain of salt and just said, wait. So to Mend's defense, kudos on that.
Well, it seems like we've all been conditioned by mainstream media to immediately jump to defense because they're immediately jumping to the worst conclusions. So, throughout this Israel-Gaza war, you've seen mainstream media buy the Hamas propaganda, spew it out as if it's a fact, and the Israelis saying, we're going to need 6 to 8 weeks to investigate to see if that was a rocket from us or who it was from. By then it's too late. The narrative has run away. So now instinctively, everybody just jumps to responding to what we're hearing about immediately. And it's terrible for everyone involved, especially those wishing to consume truth. And right now you have a lot of speculation. So when that did come out, I did say, listen, we should take our time and not believe everything that we're seeing and wait and see what actually comes out. I don't think that this administration just lost its mind overnight. Everything that they've been doing is consistently on point, and it's been what the president promised he was going to deliver, and he has been delivering on that. So why would it differ this time? Why would it change now? It didn't make any sense. The only thing
I
that
can
did,
say though, I can say that there was something that struck me, and one of the reasons why I reacted the way I did was because it was in the middle of a cycle of a lot of other news about the same region. Again, some of which turned out to be correct, like what was going on with the Houthis, what was going on with Iran, what was going on with Qatar. Even the
Great point.
conversation that again hasn't happened yet, but about the plane. All of this stuff was happening simultaneously, so it just felt like the water hose had opened and now it's time to either stick my face and drink from it or assume the water hose doesn't exist. So I ran into it, in a way that I think was at least commiserate with what else was going on in the world. Thankfully, you were there as a voice of reason, but there wasn't a lot of people that were stepping in to say, "Why don't you take a breath?"
and I
I want,
actually,
man, before I go to it, because I want to get to you, because that was a brilliant point you just made. You're 100% right. It was the decoupling of when he said with the Houthis, and all of a sudden, man, it goes to what Eric Weinstein brings up, which is known as the hybrid war. And that is not, he brings up the hybrid war versus the kinetic war. A kinetic war is between soldiers, and a hybrid war is on the internet. There is no doubt that there are the people that Trump is doing business with right now, from Qatar to Saudi Arabia to Russia, seized on those weaknesses that Golan just brought up to start a mini hybrid campaign of disinformation, man.
agreed. And with everything going on in the Middle East and Trump meeting Qatar, which is an adversary of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, I did, come up with a plausible way that this might go forward where Trump was going to announce something like that. And I thought that what he was going to do, if he was going to do anything, it was going to be announce a mini demilitarized Palestinian state in parts of Judea and Samaria, give up on Gaza, and basically give the Gulf Arabs enough to say, look, it's over with, we're done, we're moving on, the Palestinian issue has been resolved. And I thought that if there's any truth to any of these rumors, that would be the reason that he would do that, and that's how it would come about. And America would be taking over Gaza. They would have all of the Egyptians that currently live in Gaza move back to Egypt, and have some of the Jordanians that currently live in the West Bank move back to their home country in Jordan, and there would be peace everywhere. So I did see a pathway for that to actually be true. I just also thought that there was a lot of people jumping to conclusions and we should wait.
But I think your extrapolation there is similar to what everybody's doing these days. Now, you happen to come from a place of deep understanding of the region, of understanding of politics, of understanding of even logic, right? But most people don't have those skills like you do. And what's happening today, and this is why we have so much fake news, is everybody, thanks to the internet, is trying to be first. not trying to be right. I used to work in the in news media in a physical newspaper many years ago, and I went through layer after layer after layer of editor after editor after editor, fact checking and making sure that everything was accurate down to the spelling. Now every article you read has misspellings, has the wrong prime minister listed. Everything is wrong these days because everyone is just rushing to be the first to say something, which means nothing is vetted, which means now it's up to the reader to either just blindly believe, which goes back to what you were talking about with Eric Weinstein. He's talking about the capture of not just the news media, but also beyond that, weaponizing narratives, elite institutions, values, etc. All of that is within the confines of this, because now if you can convince people that this is what they should believe, whatever this is, then they will extrapolate from that point. You've extrapolated from a point of understanding. Many people are extrapolating from a point of propaganda. So they will read something like that. They won't read the next day that the JNS, another publication, says Trump is not doing this and it was an I-24 mistake. And they won't read the article that came out today about Trump saying US should take over the Gaza Strip and turn it into a freedom zone. You know, in the same way that after the missile struck the hospital and everyone blamed Israel and the New York Times blamed Israel, and it took days and days and days, actually weeks, before they didn't say big front page article, we screwed up. It was days later, a retraction, later pages saying we over relied on the sources, this mealy mouth, not even a retraction. So
Yeah.
the idea that you had that extrapolation where you were able to kind of in very measured fashion figure out what was going on. And by the way, either you're right about what's coming in the future or you're at least half right in terms of it not having happened. That comes from you being a source, which is why we have to figure out how we can rely on other people beyond just the news media these days, which is why all of these alternative sources are coming up, why people are relying on podcasts half the time also with zero information. You know, it's become a very dangerous time for people to get news.
I absolutely agree, which is a great way to segue into the influence of podcasters in the space. You know, we have come to, you know, so there's a couple of different segments within the population. There are those segments that believe that NPR is a vital source of unbiased news for, you know, the masses. There's a segment of the population who believes that the Gray Lady, New York Times, is just an institution and they are reliable as it comes. And when they do make mistakes, they'll publish a retraction somewhere in the 7th page and, you know, in tiny little corner. You know, there are people that are just still holding on to those beliefs. And, you know, they believe that there's uh, uh, places like Fox News, which is just evil and spewing lies all day long. You get the only way to sift through and get an accurate, somewhat accurate viewpoint on what's going on is you got to consume tons of news. And then you have to, you know, be able to discern what's real, what's not. I was listening to the BBC. They were talking about the attack yesterday on the hospital in Gaza. The one thing they failed to mention was that Mohammed Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar's brother, was the target and was likely killed in that attack. That they did not mention. They
Okay,
did
so just so people understand who Sinwar is was the leader of Hamas, but I who orchestrated October 7th. But I want to take a step back to what you brought up. So 2020 happened, and I'm referring to COVID, not the presidential election. And it's very important that we timeline stuff in the events that it occurred. For many years, Joe Rogan had an incredible show. People enjoyed it. It was entertainment. It was just 3 hours of sometimes boredom, sometimes very interesting conversation. And COVID happened, and we were all being told different stories by the same people on different days, oftentimes, of how to
Mhm.
treat it, of how to whatever it was. And then you had Joe Rogan, and there were very few people, anybody that fought the system, including myself and Ben Stein, their shows got blocked, deleted. We got notices from YouTube that we were going against science. And I kid you not, that was literally the emails we got. There was no recourse, nothing. And then you had Joe Rogan, who triumphantly started having people on his show that weren't going to be allowed to be bullied. He was like the bully that was protecting everybody else from getting bullied. And it all of a sudden built up Joe Rogan from just being a entertainment site to being a quasi news site. And that ushered in, and it also ushered in the doubts of what the government was telling us. So it had so many effects at the same time. It took all of us that didn't believe in Fauci and what was being said and what we believed to be correct, and it gave us this false sense that because we were right about an issue, we were all of a sudden all uh, experts on foreign affairs,
Yeah.
on every single event going on. And off went, and then obviously this past election, the Pod Bros had a massive influence in the election. I don't know how much, but it had an effect. There's no doubt it had an effect, and it elevated them even more. So here we are today, man, as you bring up with the podcasters, they are unchecked, they have a massive platform, and they are platforming so much disinformation that goes unchecked. It's like they no longer are the protectors of the bullies, they are simply bullies.
Well, it's really just another version of the credibility of the New York Times. So the New York Times spent 150 years putting out, good information for the most part, reliable information. And then when they put out these stories that are libelous and complete bullshit, people just run with it. The genocide in Gaza, whatever their story of the day is. Joe Rogan built up his following and exploded in COVID due to the things that you were mentioning, where he was just highlighting common sense things that the government wasn't talking about. Nobody was talking about getting healthy, go to the gym, get some sunlight, all that stuff, right? Um, Joe Rogan had on a ton of amazing guests. Joe Rogan is a good interviewer, but it was the power of his guests combined with his curiosity to ask the right questions generally, which is what made him such a great source. People loved it because he would have on, you know, scientists and people that you would never ordinarily stumble across. And they just had fascinating stories or fascinating information to share, which people found helpful. And if you're going about your day, you're working in front of a computer, listening to Joe Rogan, it's a great way to pass 3 hours. So he built up that credibility by having on incredible guests. And then when he brings on the Abby Hoffmans or the uh, is it Sam Smith? Not Sam Smith.
Dave Smith.
Dave Smith.
Well, I want to,
Yeah.
okay, hold
Yeah.
on a second.
Wait,
Go on.
can I say, Jude, I want to say one thing.
I
It's the
want
interesting
to,
thing. Hang on, just one thing. The interesting thing about the pod bros is that they were right. At the beginning of this process, they were right? COVID proved something to the whole world. The elites will lie to you. Okay, that's true. And it's not just that the government didn't say something, the legacy media also was not saying the same thing. They were in lockstep together. So misinformation, crackdown, whatever you want to call that, was really just censorship. And a lot of that has come out in the wash since then. So they were right in saying we're going to ask the questions that nobody else is asking or that nobody else is allowed to ask or they've decided to, keep shum about. Okay, that's true. And little by little, that became the reason why the popularity boom existed and why it continued to perpetuate, because we were able to go, there's some truth here. Interestingly, Joe, we'll use him as the example since he's the mega number one. Joe used to ask a lot of questions challenging the people who came on his shows. He would he would say, I don't want someone to tell me I am the science. If you claim that you have a different perspective, I'm going to challenge you too. So that once I come at it from all angles, like a debate competition, now the audience can extrapolate, like we were talking about before, what the truth is because they've been given all sides of the cube. Okay, like Men was talking about earlier. You have to read everything and then be able to sift through it. He was allowing people to, instead of reading, listen to these people, be challenged, talk about it from all angles. He would sometimes debate, argue, and at the end of it, you were able to say, I either believe or don't believe what this guy says. And Joe used to talk about the sunlight is the best, disinfectant sort of thing, which sometimes can be true if you are able to prove that somebody is full of shit or that they're not. The problem is, as time went on and his popularity kept growing, that he would bring people on, and the just asking questions thing was more about perpetuating their perspective. I find you fascinating, so I'm not going to challenge you at all. I'm just going to validate everything you're saying so that the audience now only has one perspective. And because they listen to me as the guy who gives them perspective, that perspective becomes true. And when nobody is on there saying, but what about Churchill isn't the greatest villain of World War
Well,
II?
I want to get into that in a different way.
Okay.
Okay. Let's
Okay.
get it into this way because you both brought up exceptional points. And so, because Mend actually, both of you brought it up exceptionally well. So, just to recap what we're sort of talking about, COVID hits, Joe Rogan has doctors on, amazing guests. They're talking about ivermectin, they're talking about a whole slew of other things. And he's questioning, he's letting people come up with their own ideas. He's debating. He's having it was a great time, especially for people that didn't have a voice. With that being said, as it progressed, he started then out of that came there are no experts. So whoever it went from having a doctor to having somebody that knows how to Google and that being the expert source. So that was sort of the transformation of the Rogan experience and elevating people like Dave Smith, who Mend was referring to. And Douglas Murray said it, what you said, to simplify it. He said, if you when you ask enough questions, it's no longer questions, it's a statement. So it became a statement show instead of a question show. And as Murray pointed out, he wasn't having opposition. You weren't, to Murray's point, everybody agrees Russia started the war. If you don't, even President Trump, you're wrong. Russia rolled in the tank. If you want to argue how we dealt with the money afterwards, that's a different story. October 7th was started by Hamas. If you want to talk about other things after, that's your prerogative. But don't forget who the attacker was. And when you listen to Rogan's show, man, that's where that's where the disconnect has become. It's no longer who started the battle, which is extremely important when we're talking about war. It's become how to fight it from people that have no idea about
It's
what they're talking about.
it's more than that because if you start off with who started the war and then they say, well, these people weren't treated well. You go back to the beginning. So Gaza got a fence around it because they were launching suicide bombers into Israel. Gaza got a fence around it because they elected Hamas after Israel pulled every last Israeli out of Gaza, gave it to them. That was a trial state. It was a trial. Let's see what they do with it. And what they did with it is turn it into a giant military compound. But if you go back before that, so he's going to say, oh, but they've been getting attacked in Gaza, for the last 20 years. Sure, because they've been firing missiles at Israel. Then you go back to the Nakba, what they call the Nakba, which is the catastrophe of the creation of Israel. None of these people, and this is where it really stems from, they're all trying to deny the Jewish indigeneity to the land. So if Jews are indigenous to that land and the people that we call Palestinians are the Arab colonizers that came from Egypt and Jordan, their entire narrative falls apart, which is fact. So they never go there. What they'll do is, Dave Smith will say, well, so and so Israeli minister said that we should, steamroll Gaza and wipe them all out. Do you know how many Palestinian leaders have called for the death of every single Jew in the world? How many Muslim leaders not in mandate Palestine? We're talking about in Syria and Lebanon and different countries have called for the eradication of all Jews everywhere. So he could pick and choose and pull some guy out of obscurity and say, look at the comment that this minister made. Who gives a shit? The bottom line is They're always trying to obfuscate the fact that the Jews are indigenous to Judea, to the land of Israel. And if you get rid of that fact, then they get muddied in all the different skirmishes and conflicts that have happened since, and the disproportionate response that Israel gives when attacked. And I think is absolutely appropriate for Israel to disproportionately respond to these attacks. They're living in a part of the world. I heard this great anecdote, which was the Israelis lose the PR battle because they live in a part of the world where if you don't show strength, you get killed. So this whole compassion narrative doesn't work for the Israelis. They need to teach these people a lesson. Don't fuck with us. Do not attack. And they don't. And these people that are
Yeah.
death cults, they don't learn. They don't learn. But there is no alternative. This is where Smith falls down, is because he goes, well, if it's not working, so why are you doing it? Because you got to continue doing it. That's all you can do. That is the only thing you can do. You can't negotiate with people that want your children dead. You just keep on
But it's
killing.
it's even, you know what I'm going to say, it's Dave Smith falls down in so many different ways in so many different places that it's beyond that. Because for him to say it's not working, then why are you doing it? Is like walking up to somebody who's got an axe and has just started chopping down a tree. They're 3 whacks in, and he's like, the tree didn't fall. You should probably stop. The whole idea of going all the way is out. Almost every war. I mean, wars are generally not fought through diplomacy. Occasionally, yes, but on the whole, throughout history, wars are ended because somebody has lost the war. And
Yes.
if we don't make somebody lose the war, as Israel has not been allowed to do over and over again, then it all comes back and happens again, as has happened to Israel over and over again. Right?
So I want to
So
ask you two
you're
questions.
You're
I want to
correct.
get to Golan. I want to get to Golan on this because I think it's extremely important. Ron Dermer, the former ambassador to the United Nations and also the envoy now to Bibi, said it the best, really. He said he summed it up better than anybody I've ever heard. He did it on, I believe, the Jordan Peterson show, when he said people always talk about negotiating. If people don't accept your right to exist, you can't negotiate with those people. If they don't believe you have the right to exist, what exactly are you negotiating? And I want people to understand that, Golan. That fact part of the world, for the most part, that's what Trump was begging this week with normalization, is saying that Israel has the right to exist. So that's one thing, Golan. And the next thing I want to, I want you to, because we all started talking about this after October 7th, and we all agreed that that Israel has the worst PR department. I'm not sure they could avoid
Yeah.
that. I'm really not sure, because we are witnessing an anti-Semitism that none of us have witnessed in our lifetimes. That's for sure. What if Israel came out simply and said, go on to everybody, you're right. Our main objective right now is to win a war at all costs, and we simply do not care about the collateral damage.
I think, first of all, I think, you mentioned Ron Dermer. Golda Meir had so many quotes just like this one that said basically, what did she say? To be or not to be is a question of compromise. But in the end, either you be or you don't be, right? So the idea that other people are not going to even accept that we have the right to exist means that we're not having a compromise. There's no negotiation. There's no amount of land you can hand over. There's no amount of good news, good deeds, good vibes that are going to make something change. In the end, it's either you win or you don't. And also, as she said, we have no alternative. That's our secret weapon. That's Israel's secret weapon. Okay. When it comes to this war, they've forgotten. They've forgotten it because they think maybe we can find a way to make the international community still think we're the good guys after all the anti-Semitism exploded, after all the lies that men mentioned earlier about genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing, and the sheer number of lies, from starvation all the way down to, it turns out, 70% of the people that they said women and children turned out to be fighting age men. All of it is lies and all of it is propaganda. But we weren't prepared for that. Israel wasn't prepared for that. And they also didn't take it seriously. And they kept saying, we have to win the war. We're going to focus our energies there. They even shut down some of their public relations departments. They had people who were on the world stage speaking out about what was going on. shutting down some of the false narratives, they said, not necessary. We want to focus on the war. It was a mistake, okay? Because that propaganda is, to your point about Eric Weinstein, this is what he was talking about when he was talking about that kinetic war, that idea of winning a propaganda war. I have conversations on a regular basis, I'm sure we all do, with people who come to me with accusations that are wildly false. And they can use as their backup, as their evidence, 1,000 organizations, whether it's Amnesty International, whether it's the UN, all of these, the ICC, the ICJ, all of this stuff, all these corrupted organizations, so that what it looks like is the whole row over here says Israel's at fault, but the truth is something different, right? One against a million. So what if Israel had just come out and said that, to your question? I think that's what they should still say today.
A hundred
I think
percent.
they should say, if you take one hostage from us, because we have a thing in Judaism, which is one life is the world entire. If you take one hostage, if you kill one baby, if you behead one Holocaust survivor, then we will rain down upon you until not only will you be sorry you ever did it, but you won't exist when it's over. And if we say that, we warned you ahead of time. There's no question about what's going to happen if you cross that red line. Then, when we do it and everyone complains, we can say, you knew before you did it. We've been clear from day one. And if they start saying it right now, you know what? We're not apologizing anymore. We're not doing half measures. We're not going to pull back. We're not going to not go into Rafah. We're not going to wait a couple of months. All of the mistakes that were made, even now, Donald Trump basically gave Bibi green light, wrap this thing up. And Bibi sat on it. And I'm not sure why, but it's one of the things that I think is one of the biggest mistakes in the entirety of this skirmish, is that Bibi didn't say, I got permission. Trump wants this wrapped up quick. I'm going to go in there and take care of business and be unapologetic about it. And if he had done that, none of the rifts that we're hearing about would exist. None of the mealy mouthness, none of the side deals would happen. It would just be a done deal. So I think the answer to your question is, not only should we have done it, we should still do it right now.
Extremely well said. Men, finish up this segment for us.
Agreed. And just going back to something that Golan said earlier, which is that Israel was never allowed to win a war. With the Houthis, we just did that too. Trump says they capitulated. You make them get up. The only way, that part of the region, pride is stronger than anything. That's why they have honor killings where they kill their own children, because of the family pride. The only way to ensure that these people actually learn a lesson and don't do the whatever it is they were doing, like in the Houthis case, bombing our ships, is you make them capitulate. They need to, not you making the statement for them, and then they get on the BBC and say that isn't true. We didn't. The Americans got tired or whatever, which is the lies they keep on telling their people. And it's the same thing with all of the Arab states that publicly demonize Israel. Saudi Arabia just came out and said the genocide thing. The leader of Saudi Arabia, the one that they're trying to make peace with because he's trying to appease his people. No more of that shit. You can't do it. What we're realizing is that radicalized populations is where the groundswell comes from. And on 10/7, it was a radicalized population that stormed across the border. Some of them may have called themselves Hamas, but there were lots of civilians. And how do you get to the point where you could murder a family with your bare hands and behead babies and strangle little children, cut off children's arms and lead them to bleed out? How do you get to that? By radicalization, right? So this population that had 20 something years or 20 years of self-rule, they managed to radicalize an entire generation. A whole generation came up through that. The people that went in, the 20-year-olds that went in, were little kids when they got Gaza. They could have done anything with it. So that's how you get there. And Israel must be allowed to win. America needs to be allowed to win. We need to, when we take someone out, which is what I think is happening with the Iran nuclear deal. A lot of people are freaking out about that. But I think we're going to wind up in a skirmish with them. And I think Trump's going to be able to say, hey, look, I gave it a great shot. I tried diplomacy. Everybody's, they love to accuse him of stuff. But the guy keeps on going for the diplomacy first, and he's trying to untangle and undo a lot of these wars that a lot of people that don't like him wanted to perpetuate. So that's where we're at.
Perfectly said. And that's the news. And it's and I just realized as we're doing this, and you are listening to the Daily Cheat Sheet, where we buy the news and sell the rumor. The news is painful. The news is painful. And we have been a generation that hasn't really had to think about this sort of stuff for a generation. Of course, there was the Vietnam War, which was a horrific thing for people to watch. There was the Korean War, which was a horrific thing for people to watch, but there wasn't social media then. And the news we're talking about right now is not fun to listen to sometimes. It is hard and it is painful and it is painful to see. And Greg Gutfeld brought up this point years ago that we probably would have lost World War II if Facebook existed and or social media because we don't have the stomach. We weren't raised with this stomach. Our parents didn't want us to have to live through this, what we're witnessing now and what we're experiencing now. So I understand why people have a hard time with the news and would rather see little bits. I want to thank people for listening to the first episode of the Daily Cheat Sheet. And I want to thank Golan Ramraz, and I want to thank Marcus Menz Stern, and I want to thank everybody. And don't forget to subscribe, follow us on Apple and all sites where you could find a download.